opportunity to address some very, very challenging issues here in San Diego County. So thank you again for allowing 2 hours out of your very busy schedules to be here with us today. And now we're going to call the meeting to order.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm ready to start roll call.
Proceed. Thank you.
Pedro Anaya.
Here.
Warsan Artan.
Here.
Kate Clark.
Here.
Estela de los Rios. I know we saw her on here. Estela de los Rios, I think you're muted. Cara Desert. Estela, you're on now. Estela de los Rios.
I'm here.
Okay,
here.
great. Great.
Did you hear me? Could
Now
you
we
hear me?
do, yes.
Thank you.
Angela Elliott Santos.
Present.
Rashid Essa. Eleanor Evans.
Here.
Tammy Gillies. We see you waving.
Difficulties. Good morning.
We can barely hear you.
Okay.
Oh, there we go.
Thank you.
Got it. And for Bill Gore, we have Nadia Binderup as his designee.
Good morning, present.
Taha Hassan. George Curry.
Present.
Nicole Murray Ramirez. I believe he was phoning in.
Yes. Present.
Ellen Nash.
Present.
Elena Perez.
Present. Good morning.
Gwen Sanders.
Present.
Summer Stefan just notified she'll be about 10 minutes late. And Samuel Choi.
Present.
Great. And Denise, it is still giving me. There we go.
Okay. Do we have a quorum? Are we good?
We do have a quorum.
Awesome. Awesome. Then we'll move on to public comment.
Yes. We did have some public speakers. We will call out, we believe we did reach out to some because we had a few different ones. The first one, Jane Hirsch, phone number ending 1690. Do we have that number present or that person present? Okay.
No, I don't believe we do.
Okay. Then the next one we will call out is Devin Julian, number ending 2827. No presence. Okay, Julian Martinez, number ending 3381.
No Martinez.
And we did reach, as for the commissions, when we received these were noted for agenda item 4, so we did reach out to them to confirm whether they intended to submit this for Human Relations Commission or something, another matter. And lastly, we did receive a public e-comment from former member Enrique Morones, and we distributed his comments. His e-comment is that it is, Claudia, I will email you complaint form, letter and response complaint. It is the same complaint as had been made by several comments previously and also made on KPBS radio yesterday about lack of professionalism and protection by San Diego sheriffs. My case was an example of the biased and unprofessional behavior of sheriffs as we were violently attacked by Trumpers and how unprofessional the response was. No witnesses questioned. No action taken on one of the protesters, which later was part of a domestic terrorists at a Capitol attack January 6th. Yesterday on KPBS, same pattern. Sheriffs greeting racist, not protecting peaceful demonstrators, and Gore again saying sheriffs in all these cases did good job. Time to have new sheriff in town, BLM, and so do migrants' rights. That was the e-comment, and he did also attach, he had another email and some additional attachments that were also forwarded to the commission will be made available to the public also. And that concludes public comment.
Okay.
Madam Chair, this is Nicole Murray Ramirez. Could I say a quick thank you? I wanted to thank the commissioners who have been calling me and reaching out to the LGBT community concerning the ongoing hate crimes in Hillcrest. I'm sure our community, and I'm sure Cara and the Center and all of us appreciate your concern and your support. Thank you.
I see Member Corey has a raised hand.
Yes, please. What I would like to basically, Madam Chair, Vice Chair, and other members, this is Commissioner Corey. I would like to personally welcome Commissioner Nicole Ramirez to our team. I had the honor of serving with Commissioner Ramirez at the City of San Diego's Human Relations Commission a few years ago, and saw firsthand a genuine representative and fighter for civil rights and human rights who worked tirelessly to promote both with integrity and honesty. Please welcome Nicole to our team. Thank you.
Thank you.
Welcome, Nicole.
I kind of thought I was here, but I know I've been ill. So I appreciate your kind words.
Madam Chair, that concludes public comment, but the next agenda item would be discussion of any community raised matters related to the commission promoting positive human relations. If this, at this time, it is limited by commission agreement to 15 minutes of discussion. If there's an item that was raised during public comment you would like to discuss.
Yes, I would like to open the floor to the commissioners in response to Mr. Maronis' issue. Is there discussion that or concerns that we need to raise? I would just like to comment first that I would like to see this matter brought to closure in a very positive human relations manner. So if commissioners, if you have some ideas, this is very concerning. And as long as we have a resident of San Diego who is not happy or satisfied, I think it is important that we get this matter resolved. So if anyone has any recommendations in order to bring closure to this matter, please share with us now.
Madam Chair, go ahead.
My apologies, George. This is Commissioner Estela dos Rios.
Yes.
I absolutely agree. I'd like to hear from someone from the Sheriff's Department if they're on the call, at the meeting. I'd like to see, what has been done so far. According to the letter, it seems like there's already been closure, but as you mentioned, Commissioner Ellen, there needs to be a positive outcome with this, and that's what I would like to see as well. Thank you.
We also have Member Perez and Member Corey with their hands raised.
Yes, good morning. I just wanted to say that, yeah, I agree that we definitely want to close this. I thought that when it had come up previously, and remind me if I'm wrong, that we had agreed to turn it over to the Sheriff's Department for further investigation, and if need be, to turn it over to the Hate Crimes Unit, and that they would then turn around and prepare a response. So I don't believe I've seen the response that would have come back to this commission for review. So unless we did receive it. So those are my comments. I would definitely want to bring closure to it, but I thought that's what the agreement was, that we would turn it over to the sheriffs to respond because they had to do further investigation about the officers that were there. And then they would respond so we would know if there was anything more that we needed to do from our end. Thank you.
I'm happy to respond on that inquiry if you'd like, Madam Chair, or I can wait it till the end.
Well, I think we already received a response. This is Commissioner Corey. We already received a letter response from the sheriff to the issue, and that was attached to the email that came from Enrique. My issue basically is we are leaving it to the sheriff to investigate itself. And with all due respect, I appreciate that. However, I believe that some things or somebody or an independent investigation should take place, not by the sheriff or investigating themselves, but in as much as somebody from the outside.
Do we have any other hands up?
Chair, can I just ask if the HRC is the best place to resolve this? I'm not sure, about the other committees and places that Mr. Moronis can take this, but I just wonder, we don't really have the power, I don't think, to help resolve this in the best way, but can we ensure that it goes to the right department maybe that does have the power?
So I'm happy to respond to that. When this matter initially came up to the commission through some other public speakers, we subsequently there was subsequent discussion at the commission as to this issue, whether or not this is the proper body. This CLERB, the CLERB is, as you may recall from their presentation, the board commissioner committee that does have the ability to investigate matters and complaints. The two prior public speakers that came forward were referred to file their complaint with CLERB if that's the route they chose, as well as the Sheriff's Department did reach out to them. So the matter was referred to the Sheriff's Department to address, and they were also informed via letter that they could file directly with CLERB if they so choose.
And
So
that's
I
what
do see.
I'm sorry, and that's what this is, Elena, I'm sorry, and that's exactly what I thought we had agreed on, that we didn't have, as Tammy said, we didn't have the authority or the resources or even the knowledge to maybe, pursue that further, and that there was a citizens review board for police practices that we could refer that to. That's where I thought we had left it, so I wasn't sure why, it was circling back here, because I think the answer is going to be the same. We don't feel we have the knowledge and authority, and I think that they wouldn't so much be investigating themselves. I get what George is saying as far as the sheriff investigating the sheriff. I think they just had to prepare the initial report, but then I think at the end of the day, the Citizens Review Board should be the ones that would handle something like this. So that's where I thought we had left it.
Can I see Nadia Binderup's hand up? Oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Mr. Corey, you can go ahead if you'd like.
Well, if I remember the citizens, the gentleman who came and spoke about the citizens group indicated that they just hand over the complaint to the sheriff and the sheriff go ahead and investigate itself. They don't investigate the sheriff themselves. And that is not really satisfactory. I believe that we cannot leave it to the sheriff to investigate itself as such, and that maybe I understand that we may not have teeth to be able to do anything as a commission. However, I agree with Enrique that it is not satisfactory. Enrique may be wrong, but what I'm saying, it's not satisfactory to leave it to the sheriff only to investigate itself and come back with a response.
Nadia Binderup?
Yes, good morning. So good morning all. For those, many of you on this commission, I have the privilege of working with through my role as the Community Inclusion Director for the Sheriff's Department. In regards to the matter regarding Mr. Enrique Moronis, we have reviewed the body-worn camera. For those, I think it was mentioned in the letter that Mr. Moronis accompanied his public comment to. And based on that footage, we didn't have any, we didn't agree with the allegations brought forward, but Claudia, you did mention, and I believe a couple meetings ago, the sheriff, when Mr. Moronis was on the call, he did express to Mr. Moronis that he is more than welcome to go to the Citizens Law Enforcement Review Board to express his concerns, and they have the ability to investigate further on their end.
And Member Corey, the Citizens Law Enforcement Review Board does have their own investigators who conduct investigations. We can respond to Member Moronis in the same manner, a former Member Moronis in the same manner we responded to the other two prior public speakers who raised this issue via letter letting them know that that this is something that they can file a complaint directly with the Citizens Law Enforcement Review Board for their review if they so choose.
Any more comments? I know this commission does not have the authority to investigate and up to even responding. However, I believe that it is important and settling for all of us as commissioners that there is a positive outcome. It may not, of course, it may not please all parties, but I still think that it needs to be brought, at least the recommendation or response needs to be brought back to the commission so that we can at least come to a conclusion of some sort that we can accept. You can't please everyone, yes. However, at least whatever the decision or the resolution is, at least could be brought back to the commission within the confines of the law.
Lady Chair, Madam Chair, may I suggest that we, instead of asking Mr. Morones to go and investigate it directly with that citizens group, maybe we go to the citizens group and tell them about the issue, since we already have 3 different public members who came back about that same specific issue, and ask them to go ahead and do their own investigation.
Madam Chair, I can answer that question, as that was part of the presentation by CLERB. And at that time, they indicated in order to to initiate investigations of individual incidences, such as something like this matter, it would need to be filed by the individual.
Okay. So was it filed by the individual?
I am not aware that whether it was or not.
Oh.
They were provided the opportunity, and they were informed of where they could file with, and we could do the same in this instance. We could send Mr. Morones a letter letting him know of the limitation of the HRC as the in its scope of authority, and refer him to CLERB where he can file a complaint directly with them, and we can provide him the link, the webpage information, so he could do that if he'd like. And we could report that back and provide that copies of those communications to the commission.
Claudia, if I may add, I'm not sure if this has been brought to the commission's awareness, but Mr. Morones was invited with our staff to review the body-worn camera footage from that event that he has brought forward to this commission. So he had the opportunity to review that. And to my knowledge, I think there wasn't any contention post that discussion and viewing session.
We also have Member Perez, Member Anaya, and then Member Elliott Santos with hands raised.
I was just going to ask actually what that process was, because I agree with our chair that there has to be closure, but how does the closure happen? Do we then write a letter where we agree that this is what we're going to do and get it out to Enrique Morones, or what is that process when we close an issue? What does the commission do?
Right.
In matters of public comment, generally the matter gets referred to the department, who then provides the outreach and the outreach to the individuals. After that, then it's considered closed. And in this instance, we could, if the pleasure of the commission is for us to do this, to communicate to former member Morones in the same manner as we did previously, which is referring them to CLERB where they can file their complaint if they so choose, we could do that, and then we could provide copies of that communication back to the commission for the closure, so to speak.
Yeah, in my opinion, I do think we should do that, because that's our follow through on it, that we heard the issue, and then here's what we're saying. We're either recommending you here or whatever, but it's in writing. And so that, to me, that brings closure.
We can certainly do that and bring those back, and we'll and they'll be noted on the agenda as communication sent.
Thank you.
And then we had members Anaya and Elliott Santos.
Good morning, everybody. Member Anaya. I'm just looking at this. I'm trying to take a step back and really look at, not necessarily from Mr. Morones or the previous two individuals who, spoke to us. I'm trying to look at this as more of of what we have, and there, I don't think we're gonna have Georgia's comments about investigating, the sheriff's investigating itself, even if he saw the body worn camera. At the end of the day, there is a trust issue, and as we all discussed in a lot of our conversations in human relations, trust is key. And I think if we're looking for like a silver bullet that's gonna close this today, we're not gonna find it. I think we as a commission, we don't have teeth in regards to litigation. We need to start looking at our system. Is the curb the best process that's responsive to our community? And I don't know if yes or no. It's a system we have in place, but does it provide what we need? I mean, I know when it was presented, there was a question if the club is even representative of our communities. Like, do we have? And until we figure out, I think as a role we can commission, we can continue questioning that and looking into, is the systems we have in place to address issues like what Enrique is bringing up today, or has been bringing up, is it the best thing in place? And I think that's the conversation, not to be had today, but that we have, because at the end of the day, we can go through the existing processes that are in place, and I can tell you, if the person filing the complaint is not satisfied, the issue is not going to be closed. It's going to continue to come up. So it's either the issue's closed, or we work solving the process. And I think that's what we need to look at, is the process in this, because it's an issue of trust, and and I think it's a national issue when it comes to our community relationships with law enforcement, right? So we need to, something's not working. Macro level. Enrique's only a spotlight on it for us. So that's.
Mr. Anaya, I believe you've cut out.
I was done at the end.
Oh, okay. We have member Perez, Elliot Santos, and Artan.
I already had my turn. Thank you.
Member Angela Elliott Santos.
Good morning, everyone. I just really feel the need to say again the need for trust. Those of us who have been on the other side of these instances need to be acknowledged and heard, and there needs to be a process. And if it even appears in the slightest that an agency is getting to check itself, that belittles that trust that we're expected to have. And that's dehumanizing. And in the presentation to come that was sent to all of us, it strongly talks about acknowledgement of things that are wrong and equity. So when one agency is allowed to check itself, or it appears that there are not the correct avenues for the people that are making complaints, then that trust, in fact, never will be real to any of us. And so I would hope that we focus on our part in the trust and transparency process. Thank you.
And then we have member Artan.
Good morning. Thanks, Claudia. To add to what members Anaya, Curry, and Elliot Santos said, Claudia, correct me if I'm wrong, but when the gentleman from CLERB came in, my understanding of how CLERB works was that they do like independent investigation, but if an officer is found to be in the wrong, that that investigation is turned over to the sheriff's department. So to me, this conversation that we're having, and this thing that is coming up again and again to the HRC, to me, I think it requires a broader look at the system, our county system, and how it works, and to understand that system in order for us to address like what are the problems. Because to me, from what I see from the community and what is transparent from this conversation is that there's not a lot of trust, and seems to be, like for example, to a certain extent, the sheriff's department investigates itself, and I personally have a problem with that. So I think maybe we need to take a bigger look at the system and how it works. Maybe I'm understanding it incorrectly, but my understanding from the clear presentation was that to a certain extent, in the case, for example, even officers are found to be in the wrong, that then that investigation is turned over to the sheriff's department. And the sheriff's department does investigate their officers.
And I would need to get back to you to confirm that particular question, Member Arton, and can do so. And we can also, if the commission likes, we can inquire of CLRB and see if they will let us know whether or not complaints on these matters have been filed with them, to see if they are looking at these issues that were raised, and report that back.
Any other comments?
Yes, this is Commissioner Estela Dos Rios again. I think a key word was mentioned in all the conversations that we had, trust. I want to go back to, promoting a positive outcome. And this is why I volunteered to be on the ad hoc committee about the mission and vision. And we're going through this process, and we're going to be speaking about this process in a few minutes. But I think it's really important that, this is a prime example why we are having this conversation about our mission and our vision and how we relate to community with these complaints. And yes, we can agree to disagree, but I believe wholeheartedly we need to have a positive outcome. That's key. And trust is key as well. If we cannot trust each other, then there's a huge problem. Thank you.
Any other comments?
I don't see any other hands raised, Madam
Okay.
Chair.
All right. I agree with all of the commissioners today, and it really boils down, it is an issue of trust, and trust cannot be built overnight. So it's going to take some systemic changes within the county of San Diego and the community to address these issues, where we can bring a positive human relations solution to this issue. Protests are not going away anytime soon. And I keep going back to, please define a positive human relations protest versus a negative human relations protest. We need to get a handle on what that really looks like at the end of the day. Thank you so much. Can we move on to the next agenda item?
Yes. Madam Chair, the next agenda item is the development of the mission, the update on the development of the mission statement for the Office of Equity and Racial Justice. The ad hoc committee has been meeting, and today the consultant will update us on the ongoing process, focusing on the common themes from the baseline meeting and the community's input regarding the development of that mission statement. And now I'll turn it over to Jess Chacon. Jess, just let me know when you need me to advance slides.
Sure. Hi, everyone. Nice to see everyone again. I'm actually going to pass it over to Guadalupe, who will be presenting. So Guadalupe, are you're unmuted, correct? Yes, you're ready to go.
Thank
you. You can just let Claudia know when you want to move to the next slide.
Okay. I would like to take a moment to say and recognize Happy Black History Month. And for me, when I think about some of the most heroic individuals, there's so many that come to mind, but I want to take this from a personal perspective. And Toni Morrison, who was not only a Pulitzer Prize winner for her work, she was also a Nobel Prize laureate for literature. And she's actually my, or was my sister-in-law's aunt, who's named Chloe as well. And what comes to mind about her work is not only her success in this field of being, you know, an American novelist and essayist, book editor. She was actually the first Black female to be the editor of fiction at Random House. She really wrote about, in my opinion, the Black experience. And she was noted, quote unquote, her work was praised for addressing the harsh consequences of racism in the US. And so I thought it was appropriate to begin with reflection on her contribution to our American history. And I also just wanted to open it up to ask if there's any, you know, someone that comes to mind that someone else would like to share. Just taking a few moments again to pause and really embrace and embody Black History Month. I would say, I think you have the ability to unmute if you'd like. Okay.
Can I jump in for 1 minute?
Please.
So I have to say that in my 14 years at ADL, someone that I met with numerous times was John Lewis. And the inspiration, like I get choked up just thinking about it. The most inspiring, one of the most inspiring people I've ever had the opportunity to meet and work with about moving the country forward. And I wanted to share that he is, for me, the person I think about the most as a hero in that regard.
Absolutely. Okay.
Hi, it's Eleanor Evans, Commissioner.
Yes, Commissioner.
You know, as a person in education, just growing up in San Diego, and I look forward to the day when Black history is legitimately embedded into our everyday life. And I know within the school system, we seem to focus on the slavery aspect of Black history in the United States, when we should be looking at, you know, pre-European history in Africa. I look forward to the day when it's totally embedded within the curriculum, within our everyday lives, so that it's not an exceptional month, but it's studied and observed and honored every single month, as with so many of the other ethnic, cultural, racial groups, at least in the United States. You know, we seem to be one of the few countries where we designate people by their quote unquote ethnicity. Okay, and other countries, if you're born in that country, you know, if you are that person of that country, you're not hyphenated. Okay, so it's wonderful that Carter was able to have Black history. First it was Black History Day, Poetry Day, then it became Black History Week, now it's Black History Month, okay? And I think the other thing is that I personally feel that the term Black history is more encompassing than the term African American history, all right? Because we know that so many people who are Black are not African American and don't identify as being African American. I think the term Black is more encompassing, and it's basically everyone knows, you know, either you're Black or you're not Black. Simple as that, whether you self-identify or do not self-identify, all righty? So in saying that, I am very, very, very honored and pleased that the commission, you know, has taken a moment to observe Black History Month. So thank you.
This is Commissioner Ramirez. I would also like us to remember who just passed recent, I believe last year, the Reverend George Walker Smith, who many have called San Diego's own Martin Luther King. He was the first elected African-American office holder in San Diego, and that was the San Diego School Board. He devoted his life up to the 90s. He was 90-some years old, and being quite a civil rights advocate. And if you can well imagine, to be one in the 1960s in San Diego's, it was very courageous. I had the honor to work with him for many years, including with our attempts to get a street named after Martin Luther King in the convention center, which were defeated. And so I always remember him for his contributions to our city and county.
Thank you, Commissioner. Okay.
Yes, one of his dreams was that school district, San Diego Unified, would name a school after him. That was one of his main desires. You know, he was my minister, and he talked about it frequently, that it would be neat if San Diego Unified School District named a school after him.
Wow. Thank you. Okay, and with that, we will begin to review where we are at in the process. And as you can see, the project map is right here. We have completed the baseline meeting, and today we're going to share what came out of that meeting, and then briefly touch upon our next meeting, which will be next week, February 11th, the Horizon meeting. And then again, so that if there's any questions from after that Horizon meeting, we will work on developing a draft mission statement. We'll continue with our survey that will go out to the community and focus groups, and plan to wrap up with a final co-created mission statement by the week of March 8th. Thank you. Next slide, please. And so the baseline meeting was very successful. We had 98 people RSVP. However, over 100 attended. So we also want to thank and recognize the work that you did as a body in circulating the invitation, you know, by providing names and to the list that again is now a tool for the office to use, and also for doing any follow-ups that you did to spread the word. And so all of those individuals have been invited to attend. And so we did experience a little bit of a small issue in that, or an issue that the actual capacity of that particular Zoom line was 100. And so we're going to use a different platform, still Zoom, that will have a capacity of 300. So it was overwhelmingly well received. And then we're going to cover some of the feedback from that report. Oh, the screen went away. Okay.
Give us just a quick moment.
Absolutely.
With our internet connectivity.
We could go to slide 5, please. One more slide. Thank you. And the next slide. So now we're going to cover some of the themes that emerged around specifically what are the values that are most important for the community, for the Office of Equity and Racial Justice. Next slide, please. Here you'll see a list, and they are in the order in terms of how many people commented through the values exercise. And in that values exercise, we posted a number of about 50 values that we came out of this whole process of, like, it is specific, they are specific values for developing a mission statement. It wasn't random. And you'll see transparency, love, those were the highest ones, and then empathy and accountability. And accessibility and inclusion were put together. They weren't together on the slide of words, but they were separate, but they were put together as the community's feedback. And then very specifically, when they refer to community, it was as in community awareness. And as you'll see, humility specific to cultural humility, with equity specific to racial equity. Trust and meaningful work and healing, while at the bottom, we also noticed throughout the entire process that came up a lot. This, and you'll see that on the slides we'll continue to share. If we could go to the next slide, please. And so this is specifically a quote from someone where they're asking that you consider to think beyond the intentions, right? If it harms minority populations. And so we need to take into consideration the outcomes that could potentially come out of our efforts. And we need to be more of have a racial lens. Also defining the root causes of disparity and racism in the country and call them by their name. Next slide. Thank you. And this also was a prominent statement about acknowledging the past, not only apologizing, but again, acknowledging the past, anything that's already happened that has hurt individuals, communities, and that you may, as you know, per the conversation that you had earlier, is still hurting people. The community definitely wants an acknowledgement of this occurrence. Next. And so again, wanting to see details on how equity will be included, as well as the outcomes. So there's the word outcomes again. And then this is important as well. So making the budget process align with the goals that will be in place. So definitely people, because when people referred to authority or in their feedback, they want to make sure that whoever is overseeing this office has the authority to make a change, and that it's not something that when someone comes to that person, that there has to be a long protocol process in addressing the issue. Next slide. So as you know, we shared examples of other cities and what was going on in other countries. And so they liked here, it said that the city of Seattle, they took action toward economic opportunity. So that stood out to them as a value. And so San Diego has to acknowledge that historical trauma and pain has transpired. So you see that repeated again. How we achieve equity is to acknowledge this historical trauma and pain. Next slide. And then these are 3 comments that were made. So decentering whiteness and centering race, challenging the system, the systemic change. So challenging the systemic change. And then again, you have acknowledgement rather than apology. Next slide. So I think this lends to actually even what Commissioner Eleanor was saying. So here the term diversity has changed to prioritizing all. They have POC communities, but you know, as we know, it's BIPOC communities before prioritizing Black communities. So the quote was, must focus on a non-erasure of the Black experience when using the term diversity. Next. The office shouldn't be bureaucratic. That goes to, again, being able to have authority to take action and to respond. It should be part of the process of healing for the community. There's the word healing again. So the connection between the Office of Equity and Racial Justice and HRC, the community has commented that that's not clear yet in terms of your specific roles. So that's going to be something that you'll want to take note of and work on that communication for the community. And that will probably be something that will have to be repeated, right, over and over and over. And then they were interested in and question what will what will it look like after the mission statement is created? So they're very interested in seeing and hearing about what next steps will be taken. Next slide. And then the office needs to be bold and be proactive in discussing next practices. So next practices, referring to even more than best practices, but what are those better practices? And then I'm going to turn it over to Jess to talk about our next steps. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, so coming up next week on Thursday, those same folks that gathered, plus everyone who wasn't able to get in from the Zoom line, will be joining us for the Horizon meeting. So the agenda will kind of do a recap for folks that weren't able to get into that. So we'll do a recap of like what happened at the baseline meeting, kind of like a high level overview, and then talk a little bit more about the role of the mission statement in the context of establishing the office. We'll have, the bulk of our time will be in breakout sessions, so we'll be in smaller groups, and then bringing it back together, sharing out, and then talking about what our next steps are for that section, because then we're done with that group and we'll move on to the next groups. Next slide, please. And then just as a reminder for y'all, you will be receiving a survey link in your email in early March. We want that to be sent to as many people as possible. All your networks, just think about like as many folks as you can send it out, all your listservs, newsletters, social media, all the different ways you can get it out. We want this to be super broad across the county. You can post the link directly, you can just forward it to them. And then we will, on our March 23rd meeting, we will have feedback, and we want to make sure we share it with as many people as possible. And the survey is going to be translated into the 5 languages. All right, any questions for us?
Quick question. Thank you so much for presenting. Can you remind me what the 5 languages are, please?
Sure. It's Spanish, Arabic, Chinese, Vietnamese, and Filipino.
Do we have any other questions for our consultants around the process?
This is Commissioner Choi, and I really appreciate the follow-up email that I received. And I was wondering, for the survey part, is there going to be something publicly available, like either in a web page or some sort of PDF that can be shared alongside with the link, so then any participants in a survey can kind of get an overview of what it's already been discussed?
So you're thinking, it sounds like you're asking if they'll have like some sort of context of like what this survey is even about.
Yeah, because I think the summary that I got was very, very, very helpful. Even though I participated, it was really good to see kind of what are the takeaways.
Yeah, I think we can definitely take that. That's a good suggestion for us, because what the survey looks like is it'll have the mission statement, and then it'll ask questions about the mission statement, but it's not giving the context. So we could have like a high level overview of what, like maybe the steps that went through it. Is that what you're suggesting?
Thanks.
I have another follow-up question, unless there's anyone else who wants to ask a question. For the folks, for like the immigrant communities who don't speak those languages, is there any effort to do like outreach to them, or like work with like trusted community members to help with the survey? For example, I'm thinking about like for example, the Black immigrant community who speak, Swahili, Kisegua, Bengali, Somali, and so on and so forth, who live in like places like City Heights, who, again, those obviously surveys not translated in those languages, but they're like, what is it called, having those intersectional identities. I think their input would be valuable to this process. So I'm wondering, is there any partnership with organizations or members that work with those communities to make sure that we're also including their input?
I'm going to defer to the San Diego County team if we have partnerships we're happy to help with whatever we can help with. So I don't know if,
Sure. I'm Member Artan, we're happy to help facilitate that. As members of the commission, you may be most aware of those immediately available resources to assist and facilitate that. We can work with the consultant to get something posted onto the HRC's webpage, which does have Google Translate on it. And Google Translate as a feature will allow for a much broader number of languages in the translation also. So we're happy to have members work with us if there are additional community languages for which they can provide some assistance in that regard. And I see member Anaya has a question also.
It's more of a comment, and I don't know if anyone at the county level, I know I provided this information to the consultant team. If anyone's reached out over to the Alliance for African Assistance, they actually have a great program, not just to translate and provide interpretive services on a multitude of languages, not just, I mean, I'm talking like over 40, 50 languages that they provide translators and interpreters. They're a local nonprofit, familiar with our community. Walter Lamb is over there and is the president and CEO of that. I know I've used them when I was doing districting work, and they were able, I mean, there was not a language that they could not identify someone to help in. And I think they do it as a nonprofit with very reasonable rates and stuff. And I'm sure because of their mission statement as an organization, may want to explore a partnership. So I don't know if anyone's reached out to them as being part of this process or just the county as a whole. I think for me, they've been a valuable resource with their services. So just throwing that out there, something to consider.
I'm curious as to terms the Filipino community. Do we have a way to communicate with the Filipino community? That's the one community that is one of the original Asian communities in San Diego, and it's a huge, huge community, but I really haven't seen any recognition or information regarding Filipinos, or information that's written in Tagalog or some of the other languages.
Yeah,
I know many Filipinos speak Spanish and English, but still, we're getting a larger increase in population of first generations from the Philippines.
I'd like to suggest, this is not to take away the need and the professionalism of interpreters, and I think if we had resources, we should utilize them to make sure there's enough language access in the survey part. But I think we can also be a little bit creative as a community here, thinking about what Warsan pointed out and what Eleanor, you said about the Filipino community. As a second generation Asian American, I am the default translator for my parents. And I'm usually the language cultural broker for my community, whether I am professionally trained or not. So for some of the more technical, let's say medical things, I usually defer to the professionals. But I think in everyday situations, you need to really rely on the youth and young people who are second generation, because they're the ones that their parents will trust. And I think if we could ask young people to fill out the survey and use their home language or their native heritage language to then survey their relatives, the uncles and aunties, I think that would be a really great way to increase the diversity of the survey results, to make sure people who don't speak English are also voicing their concerns and opinions on this. I know I'm going to try to use a survey and survey my mom, because she speaks Chinese only. And that would be great practice for me as a second generation immigrant. But also I think it will increase the diversity of opinions. So that's something I would like to throw out there as something we can easily do without additional resources.
I agree. In the school system, we do rely on the scholar that's in the school system, to communicate with his parent, our parents, regarding whatever the situation is, whether it's grades or information or meetings. And sometimes the outcome in terms of what was translated doesn't quite hit home. Okay, so again, I think, for me, it's always best to go to primary source. I used to tell my students, don't read about the Constitution, read the Constitution.
This is
But I agree,
Commissioner.
that's an excellent, if nothing else is available, yes, do that. And trust
This
that
is
they
Commissioner.
trust that they
Hello?
will, trust that they will communicate the information properly and they have the proper words. Thank you.
This is Commissioner Ramirez. There are many, almost a dozen ethnic newspapers in Chinese and Spanish and so forth. Is there a possibility we can contact these publishers of these ethnic publications and put the surveys in, or let them know that these surveys are available?
Yeah, I agree. That's, the local newspapers, the neighborhood newspapers, yes, let's utilize those.
We can make that outreach.
Thank you.
Thank you. And we also have member Arton, and I think that may be the last hand that's raised.
Yeah.
Yes, quick addition to what folks are saying. By the way, I definitely relate to what Sam said, and I'm right there with him. What is it called? I would like to add also that in the future, as it be surveys, be it services, whatever comes out of the county, I think if we're going to approach things from like an equity perspective, I think it's really important to consider like at the beginning, contracting with community organizations, contracting with folks who work in the community, rather than it being like something that comes up later on. So I would like to encourage our county to do that. And also, to me, also that means paying people for the work that they're doing. I know we're talking about reaching out to so-and-so at the moment, but to ensure that those folks are being compensated for the work that they're doing. And I definitely agree with Sam. Right now, if we don't have any organization that we we have not contracted with, that we're not working with, what is it called? Another group of people to go to is young people. Like Sam said, I translated for my parents. The friends that I know from the immigrant communities have translated for their parents. We do that on a day-to-day basis. So to me, even it might be important at the moment to hire a few young people from those communities to conduct these surveys. I think that may be something that can be very useful in this case. So I just wanted to put it out there, but we need to make sure that we're compensating people for their work and we're not putting more work on communities that are already underinvested in and expecting them to do that work for free.
And Member Anaya, did you have your hand back up?
Yeah, I did. I put it back up. I don't disagree with the comments in regards to reaching our young people and having our communities step up and do the translation. Sadly, that's what we do, right? Like that's what we've had no other choice but to do that. I mean, I remember growing up doing nothing but translating documents for my mother who did not speak a word of English, right? And that burden that's been put on our community should technically, from an equity standpoint, should not be there, right? We shouldn't have to do those things. I very clearly remember someone in the meeting we had, that workshop we had on this mission statement, they said it, I didn't say it, but it stuck with me. They said, we are the county. We should be able to provide translation. We should be. So at the end of the day, I think we're gonna do everything and anything we can. Our communities, our youth, our individuals, we're going to go out because we're passionate about this stuff and we're going to go translate and we're going to do this. But we are the Human Relations Commission should be looking at enforcing and creating systems of change that will lessen the burden on our community and level the playing field. So I think it needs to be our voice to say that's fine if that young person is going to translate for their parent, but we need to provide them as much and as many tools as possible to do that. Something as simple as, I have a lot of respect for Nicole, and he brings up our ethnic newspapers. Well, guess what? Some of those ethnic newspapers will ask us to provide the survey in their languages. Do we have the language? Do we have the surveys ready to provide to those newspapers in any and every language that they ask for? Or are we going to have to rush back and translate it after they make the request? So I think we as a commission can, demand is a strong word, but encouraging that all the tools to make sure we have an equal playing field are there and lessen the burden on some of our community members are in place. I don't want to make this sound like I'm disagreeing with any of the comments that were made previously. I actually agree with every single one of them. I really agree that we need to pay people and organizations what they're worth. Too many times we, again, place the burden on them and take advantage of them without giving them what they deserve as well. So again, don't want to make it sound like I disagree, but it's if we don't start demanding these things now and these resources, then in the future, all we're going to hear is like, oh, we didn't have that resource. Can you guys figure it out? We've been figuring it out. So thank you.
Madam Chair and members of the commission, the county recently did adopt a language access policy, and we are currently working on looking into all the available avenues and resources so that we can continue to expand language accessibility. So we hear your comments and we'll continue to look into it, and we will we'll reach out to some of you who have raised specific languages that are not currently being translated to further discuss that with you.
Great. I agree with all the comments regarding the survey, but it's also important to remind ourselves and the county particularly that all these different languages, all these different communities are your clients and your customers. So there really shouldn't be an issue with languages and reaching out, because these are our customers. So the consultants here today that are talking about the different languages, there were the population of languages you mentioned the number was really too small. And I know that there are clients from all the different ethnic groups here in San Diego that need to be represented in this survey. So you need to be sure that all voices are heard. Rather, whatever language it is, those individuals' voices has to be heard. Thank you. I think we can move on to the next agenda item.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The next item is agenda item 6, which is a presentation on extremist and hate groups by the Anti-Defamation League. We have Matthew Brown from the ADL to make his presentation. He will be screen sharing and providing the presentation for you all.
Welcome, Matthew.
Thank you very much, everybody. I appreciate it. It was interesting listening in on the tail end of that last discussion. So thank you, commission members. The ADL appreciates the opportunity to present on this current significant threat that the FBI, the Department of Homeland Security, and many other authorities, as you probably are aware, have recently stated is the most significant domestic threat before us. And just yesterday, the ADL published a report on extremism and murder. Highlighted in that report is annual analysis by the ADL Center on Extremism, which tracked that domestic extremists were responsible for killing at least 17 people in the United States in 15 separate incidences in 2020. And although the numbers of murders by extremists were down from the 2 prior years, extremist activity in general was on the rise. In 2020, the ADL recorded 16 right-wing extremist-related terrorist attacks or plots, an increase from the 13 recorded in 2019. Additionally, the ADL documented more than 5,000 incidences of white supremacist propaganda distribution in the United States in the year 2020. That's 2,276 more than in 2019. Propaganda, as you are aware, points towards the presence of extremists and provides for recruitment and radicalization. So I want to, first of all, before we move on, I want to make sure we're all working with the same terminology. And so I want to talk about, well, what is violent extremism and how does it differ from extremism? So let's first define extremism. Extremism, adherence to religious, social, or political belief systems that exist substantially outside of the belief systems that are more broadly accepted in society. And it's critical, again, to differentiate extremism from violent extremism. Extremist ideology does not always equate to violence. However, there is a definitive pathway to violence. As it relates to violent extremism, advocating, engaging in, preparing, or otherwise supporting ideologically motivated or justified violence to further social, economic, and political objectives. Important to differentiate those two. So let's examine the extremist groups and their pathway to violence. Adherents of extremist ideologies who have acknowledged that they have membership to extremist groups have demonstrated overt acts of defiance and violence for a number of years. Recent history leading up to the January 6, 2021 attack on the US Capitol building have included, as depicted in this screen, the Charlottesville 2017 Unite the Right white supremacist rally, which led to 1 death. Also, another incident, the mass shooting of 9 Black parishioners in Charleston, South Carolina church in the year 2015, and several other horrific acts of violence before and after those incidents. So let's fast forward to what is foremost on all of our minds, the January 6, 2021 attack on the US Capitol building. Just recapping that event, on January 6, 2021, a violent mob of right-wing extremists and others stormed the Capitol. They came to Washington, D.C. and several state capitals to disrupt and overturn the results of the presidential election. Angry rioters, many wearing and carrying white supremacist symbolism, invaded the Capitol building, spewing rage and hate. 5 people were killed, including 1 law enforcement officer. So we ask, how does one develop this frame of mind and then decide to take action? So I want to walk through a spectrum real quickly, again, to make sure we're all operating with the same understanding of what it means to be vulnerable, accept an ideology, become motivated, and then plan for action, whatever that action might be. This is what the spectrum looks like. It generally begins with someone who may be vulnerable to an extreme belief, and they become attracted to it as an all-encompassing ideology that motivates them to act peacefully or act violently. It's important also to distinguish action from violent action. For example, if someone is motivated to act, meaning motivated to protest or engage in civil disobedience, possibly in the form of nonviolent marches or protests involving street blockades or sit-ins, understand that does not mean that they necessarily belong on this spectrum. Here in this spectrum, we are concerned specifically with motivations to act violently. We are examining someone who is motivated to attend a protest for the purposes of engaging in physical violence versus someone simply motivated to attend a protest. So we must ask the question and determine if we are concerned with potential violence and there is some reason to believe an individual or a group may be planning action, we have to ask, as you see in the red there, what are this individual's or this group's intentions? So we're going to take a quick look at intentionality, where we determine that words in fact do matter. With intentionality, we're going to see phrases on social media or vocalized in public that indicate certainty. Certainty meaning they are contemplating, should we or shouldn't we? Something must happen. We need to, they may say, or we have to, or there's no choice but to act. And then with certainty, there's also an expression of urgency. And we have to examine urgency. They are considering, when should action be taken? It must happen soon. There's an imminent threat, or the time is now, or rise up before it's too late. And then there's enormity. They are weighing enormity. What are the consequences of us not taking action? If it does not happen, the world as we know it ends. So for researchers and analysts and law enforcement and decision makers, social media examination and intelligence from those on the ground assessing extremists' frame of mind is critical to determine their intentions. And if there exist threats that need to be mitigated, we have to examine intentions. So, okay, so let's, with that understanding, that foundation, let's get back to the attack on the Capitol building. And let's take a look at what extremists were present on January 6th. Among the supporters who stormed the US Capitol on January 6th were members of right-wing groups, including the Proud Boys, the Oath Keepers, and 3%ers. The increasing violence and visibility of these groups have turned them into symbols of white supremacy and racism. They were involved in the deadly Unite the Right march in Charlottesville, Virginia in 2017 that I depicted a few slides earlier. And they were involved in nationwide street clashes with racial justice protesters this past year. The images that you see on this slide are exactly as they appeared in Washington, D.C. footage and photos from the incident that day. Some of these symbols were on shirts, they were on flags, hats, and even stickers linking to right-wing extremists across the spectrum who were present. We saw NSC, which stands for the National Social Club, which is a neo-Nazi, strongly anti-Semitic white nationalist group with small autonomous regional chapters in the United States and abroad. We saw KEK, K-E-K, which is a fabricated deity linked to a semi-ironic religion embraced by alt-right white supremacists. All of these were present on that day. ADL has identified now over 70 individuals who were inside the Capitol building on January 6th, linking the images with footage from the scene. Among them were 20 identified extremists, which include 7 white supremacists, several QAnon believers, identified Oath Keepers, numerous Proud Boys, and many militia members. During the rallies, one of the greatest sources of intelligence for us about what was happening on the ground were the many live stream feeds, some from these extremists that you see depicted in this picture. They were broadcasted on an array of platforms, which included DLive, Periscope, Facebook Live, Twitch, and Instagram. Notable are the elements of extremism that use technology, and they weaponize it to expand the reach and fuel this hateful subculture, while at the same time luring, recruiting, radicalizing, inciting those engaged in the virtual community, those that aren't present but are streamed in, if you will, with a sense of belonging. Live streamers participate in banter. They interact with posts in their chat from their followers, and they are egged on to engage in racist, anti-Semitic, or hateful behavior. And in some cases, they cash in as followers donate to their live streams in exchange for a shout out on them, that they're virtual and they're being shouted on by somebody live streaming. So now, what about the extremist presence within San Diego County? Let's take a look at a few of those. These are photos from the January 6th march leading up to the Capitol building. And depicted here are the Proud Boys in their traditional yellow and black. This particular individual you see on the right is also the same individual you see in the yellow knit cap in the march. He is Michael Sobczak from Escondido in the northern part of our county. He's the American Legion post commander. And as you probably saw in the news a couple of weeks ago, he was banned as a result of his portrayal as his role with the Proud Boys in inciting violence. He was banned from the national post of the American Legion. However, that does not remove him from a local post within the city of Escondido and their American Legion post. So who are the Proud Boys? They are a misogynistic, transphobic, Islamophobic, and anti-immigration group. They espouse white supremacy and anti-Semitic ideologies. They incite violence. They participate in acts of violence, and they seek to intimidate. Here's a connection here to San Diego County. As you may have followed also yesterday in the news, the country of Canada have just designated the Proud Boys as an official terrorist organization in their nation. The Proud Boys are widely spread in Canada and in the United States. Canada was considering this designation prior to the January 6, 2021 attack on our US Capitol building. However, they advised that they were further influenced in designating it as a terrorist organization as a result of this attack. Take a look at another group. This is the Patriot Front. This is their propaganda sticker. And they traditionally use patriotic American imagery to influence and recruit. They are considered the most prolific white supremacist propaganda mechanism on US campuses nationwide. They espouse a racist ideology, anti-Semitic beliefs, and they are a definitive white supremacist group. Historically, they have had strong stickering and flyer presence as a recruitment tool at San Diego State University, University of California, San Diego, UCSD, Mesa College, other community college, and it continues today. In the ADL's annual audit of hate incidences and hate crimes, measuring propaganda incidences, repeatedly, the Patriot Front is on the top of the list. Again, a presence in San Diego. Take a look at another group. Now this group, Identity Europa, also known as American Identity Movement, although now defunct, the identified members of this group have joined other active white supremacist groups, which are alive today. And important to note is that the founder of this group, an individual by the name of Patrick Casey, AKA Reinhard Wolf, the founder again of the movement, is a graduate of San Diego State University in the year 2016 and initiated a lot of the propaganda, testing it on that campus at San Diego State University. Their mottos are protect your heritage, sort of depicted in sort of a written or a semi-removed format on this particular flyer on the wall of the university. They state, let's begin great again. Multiculturalism is having a negative impact on society. Ethnostates, or areas occupied overwhelmingly by people of one race, would be an ideal solution. Very dangerous creeds. And then we're gonna really resonate home with this. This is the symbol of the National Alliance. This is a flyer of the National Alliance. This picture depicts a utility box in the San Elijo community of our city of San Marcos in northern San Diego County. What is the National Alliance? They are a neo-Nazi group who advocate for the eradication of the Jews and other races. They are all for a creation of an all-white homeland. And their motto from their website, we must have a thorough rooting of Semitic and other non-Aryan values and customs everywhere. This group was founded by an individual named William Pierce in 1970, and he authored a book or a publication that I'm sure many of you are familiar with. It's called the Turner Diaries, which was the inspiration for Timothy McVeigh's 1995 Oklahoma City bombing on the federal building in Oklahoma City and other acts of terror. The group was thought to have lost most of its members. However, here they are in San Diego County just 6 months ago in the nice community of San Elijo in the city of San Marcos. This was the National Alliance supremacist group, extremist group, letting the community know they are present. There were significant reports to us and to law enforcement. 10 News did a piece on it. The ADL was interviewed about it. And the Sheriff's Department has investigated this. There was a lot of concern. What does this mean in our community? They were letting their presence be known. I would be remiss if I didn't mention this group because I'm sure it's on some of your minds, the 3%ers. There have been several reports in San Diego County since January 6th of 3%er flags being flown over neighborhoods and residences within our county, and stickers adorned to vehicles driving around our city streets and our county streets. The group, as you may be aware, name derived from the erroneous claim, again, erroneous claim, that only 3% of American colonists were actively fighting in the field against British forces at any given time during the American Revolution. And although 3%ers demonstrate a disdain for the federal government, because many adherents to the movement supported the prior presidential administration, in the last 4 years, they were not opposed to the federal government. and rather directed their ire at other perceived foes with actions and activities, including leftists, Muslims, and immigrants. The 3%ers are an active anti-government militia movement who state that their small number of dedicated patriots, quote, patriots, unquote, protect Americans from government tyranny. Their track record of criminal activity ranges from weapons violations to terrorist plots and attacks. They have a frequent armed presence to date at public protests against lockdown measures and restrictions. The 3%ers, again, presence in San Diego County. So what does this mean for the future? What is the outlook as it relates to extremism in 2021 and beyond, and the United States and elsewhere? The anger and vitriol we saw on January 6th will not dissipate anytime soon. Add to that the factor that President Trump was impeached in the House, and now that issue is moving to a trial in the Senate. This will be additional fodder to those who feel aggrieved. We know that a new breed of extremists has emerged. Those who are living in an entire ecosphere of disinformation, lies, and conspiracy theories, fueled by followers of the QAnon, its enablers, and many others. Over the coming months and years, as this new breed of extremists mingle with established extremists, including white supremacists, anti-government extremists, anti-Semites, hardcore conspiracy theorists, and violent militants, these individuals could coalesce into a distinct and potent extremist movement in their own right. The good news, and there's always got to be good news, is that any protests going forward will almost certainly be much more tightly controlled and restricted than those staged on January 6th. We saw that the inauguration on January 20th obviously had a significant, much more security, as did state capitals across the nation on Inauguration Day. The heightened security and serious execution of justice against those who broke the law may suppress attendance at both official events and protest events. So, in summary, we must keep in mind the current landscape. Each So thank you for giving the ADL the opportunity to present a little bit on domestic violent extremism. We focus a lot of effort on it. We are very concerned with it. Here's my contact information. If the ADL can be any of assistance to you, we are local. We are regional, but we are also local. So please do not hesitate to reach out to us. Again, we focus a lot of advocacy for legislation. We do a significant amount of education for groups, organizations, law enforcement, school administration, and faculty, and school students. And we investigate through our Center on Extremism and other means. I'm available for any questions, and I know that my director, Tammy Gillies, is also on the call this morning. Thank you.
Thank you, Matthew. That was really helpful, and I'm sure may inspire some questions. So we will open up the open it up to members for questions regarding this matter. And I did want to also thank our commission member, Tammy Gillies, for arranging to have the presentation today.
Thank you so much, Claudia. I just want to take one moment before any questions to say that if there's one takeaway from Matt's presentation today, it's the importance of the Human Relations Commission and the fact that we are all in this together, that these are equal opportunity haters. They don't pick one group or another group. They hate all of us equally, whether it's the Jews, the Blacks, immigrants, LGBTQ, any community that they feel is threatening their position in the country, they hate us equally. And we must stay together. And that's, again, the importance of this commission to bring the community together to say this is not going to be acceptable here in our community. So thank you for hearing us today. And thanks, Matt.
Are there questions from the members?
I will say this, if I may, if we're waiting questions or not, that I know perhaps with the tone of my voice and then the material that I presented, there's certainly an air of seriousness and gravity to it, if you will. And it is significant. And like I said early on, obviously, we were all aware of the Department of Homeland Security coming out with an advisory bulletin a couple of weeks ago now that announced this significant domestic terrorism threat in the United States. And there's a lot of legislation that's underway. I know that the district attorney's office under Summer Stephan's guidance is following some federal legislation very closely that has to do with, it's called the Domestic Terrorism Prevention Act. And that will necessitate, hopefully, some training for law enforcement and others when it boils down to the state level. And domestic terrorism is definitely on the forefront of everybody's mind. It's serious, and the idea was to show you that San Diego, 8th largest city in the nation, 5th largest county in the nation, has some presence that we're concerned with and that our law enforcement partners are concerned with, but that we're monitoring as closely as possible to ensure that we are in front of it as best as possible. And then the last thing I want to say is, again, I started out, remember, differentiating between extremism and violent extremism. And obviously there's a significant difference.
Thank you, Matthew. I did want to let the commission know that we will be at a future meeting also have a presentation in regards to hate crime prosecutions within the San Diego County also to be able to continue the conversation. But do we have questions for our presenter or for Ms. Gillies? Madam Chair, I do not see any hands raised.
I have a question. As a resident of San Diego, I'm looking at this presentation through the lens of a resident. And what are some of the, what I want to say, what are some of the symptoms? What are some of the ways as a resident we can recognize some of the behavior? And with that said, what can we do with it? In terms of, in terms of observing these kinds of behaviors, or what are the signs that we should look for? Yeah. Particularly, I'm a Black person living here in San Diego all my life. I've encountered racism, bullying. I was a busing student, went to an all-white school, back in the day. So I've experienced it, and I'm almost numb to some of this. But when you talk about this presentation and anti-defamation and what I witnessed on TV watching the attack on the Capitol, that's a whole nother level. So what are the signs? What should my children look out for? I'm already sharing, with my boys about interaction with police. I have to have that conversation. Now, are you asking me to have another conversation with my family members, with me, going about my business every day in San Diego? What is that? How does that resonate with a resident of San Diego in terms of this kind of a presentation?
Thank you. I think it's an excellent question. We would want every single household to ask that question if we had our druthers, that's for certain. And I applaud you as a parent addressing that with your sons. Fantastic. And then the other comment I had to make is that you state that you're numb to some of the racism and discrimination that you've experienced. That's the manner in which you've had to deal with it and tolerate it. And one of the things, of course, that in response to your question is the first and foremost is when there are hate incidences, such as graffiti and flyers and stickers and slurs being thrown out and things of that nature, to include some things that you see on social media. The first thing that we want to do is to expose it. We want to draw attention to it. We certainly don't promote it, but it's important to expose it. And we work closely with our law enforcement partners in responding to incidences, okay, so that they don't evolve into crimes. Remember, an individual, when they're vulnerable and then they choose to take some action, they may, depending on what direction they go, they may play around with some of these different incidences, if you will, and it's important to nip them in the bud before they happen. One of the good news pieces of news also that you just spurred a thought about is that we've had schools now, K through 12 schools, start to reach out to us about what does radicalization and recruitment look like. Particularly, they're talking about online, as their students are online on the open net, and Lord only knows what other types of sites that they're seeing. So they want to know what it looks like, and then they want tools that they can work with within the schools, and that tools they can work with within the families and the parents to recognize it and to counter it. And so, you know, I guess the short answer to your question is, you talk about symptoms, any sort of indication. And when it comes to individuals, like if it were your own children, you talk about isolation. And if they're struggling with their identity, what an individual sometimes will do is because they spend a lot of time online and because they feel isolated and they're struggling with their identity, they may look for a family, if you will, I'm calling it a family, but a group online that is sympathizing or empathizing with them and then drawing them another direction so that they can be a part of a group. It's the same sort of tactic that street gangs use. And it's the same lure that an individual has to a street gang. They're looking at forming some identity. So isolation, and then of course, obviously, this is obvious, I believe, but boy, oh boy, do we want parents and we want administrators to question their children. Who are you communicating with online? And how do you feel about that? And asking those hard questions.
Yeah, I'll also jump in and say that we need to report things. So you can report to law enforcement when you see an incident. There are First Amendment rights. So the guy that drives around East County with the giant Nazi flag on his truck, I don't know if you've seen him, but you know, he has the right to do that. He can do that. But it's okay to report that, because the more data we have, right? Data drives policy. So what are we seeing in our community? And is there an increase? And can law enforcement look at what's happening and see trends? And so I think reporting it, being aware, the guy, I don't know if you remember last year, there was a guy in Vaughn's in Santee with a Klan hood on, right? And people were like, well, that's his right to do that. Actually, it's not his right, because Vaughn's is a private business, and they can and should have asked him to remove it and leave. The same with the guy with the the swastika mask, right? So it is good to report these things, as Matt was saying, to shine a light on it. Let's see where it's happening and let's take action against it. So I would just add that, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, we have member Anaya's hand up.
Hi, Matthew. Thank you for the presentation. I hate to admit that that unfortunately this stuff isn't anything new, you know, right? It's been around for a long time in our community. And you brought me back to a moment in a previous life. I used to run a program under the NCCJ called Camp Anytown and Camp Minitown. And oftentimes we, a lot of the youth that were sent to us, along with traditional leaders, were some of the youth of children of families who were deeply involved in these types of groups, right? And what I often found with the young people is that, you know, in many ways we're kind of born into this culture, if I could use the word culture loosely. and did not know any other way. And when they came to us, you know, and got to meet other people and interact, they kind of, you know, had this epiphany moment where they're like, oh, you know, this is wrong. I don't, but then reality hit. I had them for a weekend or a week, and then they had to go back home. And when they went back home, they, for pure survival, they had to go back to the ways that they were almost indoctrinated in, right? And couldn't. And so I guess my question is what are we doing to kind of stop that cycle, like with families like that? Because you know, even let's just say we took out their ability to recruit outside of their community, they're still recruiting within their community, right? How can we provide assistance to those young people? And I only bring that up because I very vividly remember how painful it was to put some of those young people back on a bus knowing what they were going back to.
Yes. And Mr. Anaya, I think with, you know, it's the old nature versus nurture thought process. And boy, oh boy, does what happens in the home front have significant influence. So a couple of thoughts on that. I know within the San Diego anti-hate coalition, we talk about town hall meetings, and we talk about that there needs to be a concerted effort to present to and influence as many community groups as possible, so that those types of households get hit with that type of presentation. Also, more and more schools are trying to get involved. The ADL's got a program involving schools, No Place for Hate. And if the schools can influence them and spend, you know, if the schools spend 6 to 8 hours with a student per day, and then there's a significant or a portion of their curriculum that addresses this issue, and then they go home to it, hopefully it will be more than just a weekend. It'll be on a regular curriculum. There's ethnic studies courses coming out, and there's Holocaust training coming out, and there's hate and bias training coming out in schools. And hopefully that can have an influence on these poor kids that go into that, what seems to be sort of an untenable, unwinnable situation, so that it can help balance out the level of influence. Tammy, did you have anything more about that you'd like to
Yeah,
say?
I just want to add that with the new administration, we are doing a lot of lobbying on funding for additional programs. We have just partnered with the McCain Institute at Arizona State, who have put together sort of this cadre of formers from these groups that are helping to bring people out of this type of ideology. So many times it's the formers that can help to help someone who's in it find a path out of it. So I think that we should all be looking towards getting some increased funding from the government in these areas to be able to help these students, to find their way out. You know, hate is learned. None of us are born with it. We know that it's learned and it can be unlearned.
Thank you so much, Member Gillies. I don't see any.
This is Commissioner Ramirez. I just think it's important to acknowledge and thank the ADL. As an activist for over 50 years in San Diego, I can tell you that their decades of dedication and work on these issues and hate crimes has benefited all our diverse communities. So I really want to let them know how much we appreciate their decades of hard work, which have made a great difference in San Diego and all of our diverse communities.
Thank you.
I do have one more comment. I'm affiliated with Moss number 8 here in San Diego. It's right down the street. In fact, I can almost see it from my house on Imperial Avenue. And I know, and I've worked with Hugh Muhammad for many, many years. Mm-hmm. He's a BAPAC member. As we speak, he's on the street right now giving out food. He has created a food distribution center right on his property. I do want to publicly raise concern that it is my understanding that mosque number 8 is possibly on the list as an Anti-Defamation League hate group. And if you can confirm that with me, and if it is the case, I would like to also talk about how, if possible, that group can be removed, because I know the good work. I respect the mosque. I respect I respect what they're doing in the community. They're one of our pillars. And I really think it's important that if you could verify that, first of all, and secondly, if there's a process of removal, there's a process for removal, I want to make sure that that is documented in the record today and publicly stated. Thank you.
So I can respond by saying that we don't label specific mosques in that manner in any way. But we do say that the Nation of Islam is, and Reverend Farrakhan, very anti-Semitic, very anti-LGBTQ community. The language that comes out of that organization is hateful and divisive. And so if there's an affiliation, that's a challenge for us. We don't say this specific mosque is doing bad things. I don't know, but it's the overarching agency that, and I'm happy to talk about this offline as well, or to provide additional information to the commission on why we say that about Reverend Farrakhan.
Thank you.
I think the direction of the Nation of Islam has changed. Perhaps there was a time when that kind of language was being used, but I think if you listen to what is being presented by Minister Farrakhan, you will see that it's an entirely different message. And I agree. I think it's unfair to label the Nation of Islam as being a hate group, because it's not.
This is Commissioner Ramirez, and all due respect, what Tammy said is absolutely correct. The LGBTQ community has been subjected by this group and the Nation of Islam for decades with hate and action against our community. So I think, in all due respect, you're absolutely incorrect. It hasn't changed. It's been the same way for decades. Now, I do not take away that they do a lot of community and neighborhood outreach, as you said, with the food outreach, but they have stuck to their anti-LGBTQ and in many ways anti-Jewish comments that regularly come out in his sermons.
And Madam Chair, I would be very happy to share, if it's appropriate, with the commission some statements, that I can send along to Claudia of even the most recent speeches that have happened. So I'm happy to share that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Once again, thank you so much, Member Gillies and Matthew Brown, for the information that you shared with us today. Madam Chair, that concludes all hands raised.
Okay, great. Thank you, Tammy, and we definitely will take you up on your offer, offline, online, but this is very important. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
On to the next agenda item. I think we're almost at the end.
Yes,
Summer,
Madam.
District Attorney Stefan, I saw you were unmuted. Did you want to say something?
No, it's okay. We'll have our chance in the next meeting, so I don't want to take up time. Right. We'll have a full presentation. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Claudia?
Madam Chair, our next agenda item is number 7, which is just a quick update on the state of vacancies.
Yes.
The commission has 2 vacancies for commission nominated seats due to 2 youth individuals, or two seats representing the youth demographic. We have requested demographic information from our commission members and will be presenting that information at the next meeting. To date, we have, just as a recall, we do have 30 applications from the prior year that are still pending and valid open applications. And we are in the process of receiving additional applications. I don't have a firm number for you at this point. We've received a small handful. You all have received the information as to how to share the link for applications to prospective board members. So they're able to do that. So at the next meeting, we should be able to share the demographic information. The demographic information with you all to see if there are particular opportunities or gaps, and we will make an effort to distribute the actual applications if we're able to at that time. And by way of reminder, the Board of Supervisors does have 10 open seats for which they will be making nominations. And as soon as those appointments are made, as well as the appointments for the commission nominated seats, we will reach out to those members to inform them of the meeting calendar and provide them the overview and orientation of the commission, such as Brown Act training, our bylaws, and duties and responsibilities, and the rules of order. And that completes the update.
Okay, great.
That concludes all the agenda items, Madam Chair.
Great.
This is Nicole Marie Ramirez. Wasn't my agenda item put on about monthly reports from the district attorney on hate crimes statistics monthly? Sylvia, didn't you say you were going to get that on the agenda item?
The presentation from the DA will be coming forward at a future meeting. I believe it's the first meeting in March, and that information will be forthcoming at that time.
No, but would this be made a permanent monthly report that all of us get on the latest hate crimes within the county, a report on any of the monthly incidents?
Oh, a monthly stats report from the DA on hate crime cases?
Yeah, that's what I request.
Yeah.
Yes, that's what I requested.
And
This would be a monthly report that each of the commissioners would get about hate crimes that have occurred within San Diego County. Do you remember our discussion?
Yes. And because the DA will be presenting on hate crimes and the stats during a presentation, that's when that matter was coming forward. But the request I understand the request has been made, but we don't have the stats to share at this point.
No, pardon me, but I'm getting a little confused. My request was, and I think you had said it was affirmative, that on this meeting, we would take a vote about having the district attorney report to us monthly, every month, on hate crimes within the county of San Diego, that we would get a report statistics because they are obviously happening months. I think all of us would like to know what hate crimes are happening and to what communities and etc.
Commissioner Ramirez, I definitely support your request. However, in terms of a process, I believe that the district attorney is going to be presenting on this matter, and then we can address that request as a body in terms of a vote to support that request at that meeting in March. And going forward, then we would have those reports available to us. So let's wait till March after their presentation, the district attorney's presentation, and then definitely we will take that particular request up as a body of commissioners because that's a part of the protocol. Okay.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Member Maria Ramirez.
I think that is the end of our meeting.
Yes, Madam Chair, there are no further items on the agenda.
We got 5 extra minutes. I hope you all have a great week, and we'll see you February 23rd, and enjoy the rest of your weekend. We're going to look at all of these matters, even though I feel so negative right now. in regards to the ADL presentation. It really is about love. I think 2 words came out today, love and trust. And we will definitely walk in those words of love and trust and positive human relations, because that's what we're all about. Thank you for being on the call. Take care.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Are we adjourned?
You are adjourned. I'm sorry.
Thank you. Sorry. Thank you.